I called the August 15th Development Review Board meeting to order. We have some small administrative stuff that we have to deal with at the beginning of the meeting. The first is approval of minutes, the minutes of July 18th meeting. I'm looking for a motion to approve those minutes.
Good.
Second?
Second.
Any corrections, comments, observations, changes to the minutes?
I have to abstain, I wasn't here.
Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? So minutes are approved, Brian, and we have one, two, three, four, 5, 0, 2. Thank you. Can you confirm the meeting has been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. We'll deal now with the disclosure of conflicts of interest and any ex-parte communication. Any member of the board wish to step down on any of the applications tonight? No.
I have a ex parte communication to disclose concerning application 2011-106. I received an email from Mr. Chapman, I think who is in a butter to the property, and he expressed his concern regarding the subdivision. I responded to his email by telling him that I was a member of the Development Review Board. I'm an attorney and I can't represent him in the matter, and recommended that he contact counsel, and I forwarded to him Brian's contact information. And that's the limit of my conversation with, or my discussion with Mr. Chapman.
Okay. You don't feel on that basis that you should recuse yourself? No. Okay, thank you. This is the first meeting that I've chaired, and or maybe I chaired the last one, I can't remember, but my predecessor had a lovely little speech that he gave, talked about the board and how we operate. I shall attempt to replicate that. This board operates, the Development Review Board operates on the record, which basically means that we take testimony from, or evidence from, the applicant and interested parties, and this is recorded. And we, having considered that information that's given to us, we then make a written decision. It's a decision which is released to the applicant, to the public, and to the as a whole. We record the testimony in a number of ways. It's electronically with our TV cameras, audio with a little audio recorder here, and also any written documentation that gets given becomes a part of the record. There are some aspects of operating on the record that the public should be aware of, and that is that in the event of an appeal or going to the environmental court, then the environmental court considers the evidence that's produced to this board and reviews that, and doesn't start in the de novo process and look at new evidence at that point. So the public should be aware, and the applicant should be aware, that this is your opportunity now to provide evidence to the board on the application, and this is your only opportunity to do that, unless we continue and have another hearing. That the environmental court will not consider new evidence at a later date. Hopefully our decisions don't go to the environmental court. We try for that not to be the case, but that certainly is a situation. We also take, as a board, a reasonably expansive view of interested parties. That is, anybody who comes before this board can provide evidence or testimony to us. We ask that you step forward and speak. Give us your name and speak clearly to the microphone so that we can get a good audio record of it, or a good recording of it. The court should, in the event of an appeal, may or may not determine that you have valid interested party status. An applicant certainly does, but we as a board, the Board of Brattleboro, will listen to anybody that wishes to come forward and speak. With that in mind, because we're on the record, we ask that people affirm that they will provide testimony, that testimony will be the truth and nothing but the truth. So there's an oath. If you wish to give testimony tonight, there's an oath that I'll ask you to affirm. If you, anyone wishing to give testimony, if they'd like to stand and I hereby affirm that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury. I do. Thank you very much. One last administrative piece of information is that this board is 7 full members and 3 alternates. We're currently a board of only 7 members. We're looking for alternates. It's important that, if at all possible, we get to a full quota. And the reason for that is that in the event of people recusing themselves, or in the event of people being ill or being sick, then we call on the alternates to be a part of the process. In making decisions, it's necessary to have a majority of the board, not a majority of those present. So tonight we have a full board, so there's 7 of us here, so it's a 4-3 verdict, or 4-3 majority is all that's required. If the board was smaller, then it becomes progressively more difficult. So as an appeal to the public, please, if you have any interest in joining us, put your name forward and become an alternate on this board. Okay, so now we'll open the public hearings tonight and call application 2011-099 Laura Stennis and Abigail Nukin, is it? You'd like to come forward, please. To the table, actually. Far side. Please tell us about your application.
Sure. When we moved into our house, our garage that held 2 cars was in really bad shape and falling over. So we deconstructed our garage and now are left with a platform. And the right-hand side of the garage is extremely close to our neighbor's property line. And we would like to build a shed in the same footprint that's smaller than the garage, and off of the shed we'd like to have a carport where we can park both our cars. And the reason why we're requesting a waiver for it to be closer than the 5-foot boundary is we're hoping it could be 2.5 feet from our neighbor's property line, because that would give us enough space to continue to park both our cars side by side. If we move the carport 5 feet in from the property boundary, we wouldn't be able to park our 2 cars side by side and still back out. We'd hit our house if it was in further, so it's kind of a tight space. I wish that picture showed both our cars parking, but it doesn't, unfortunately. But before, we could park our 2 cars side by side, so we're hoping that we could do the same thing in the carport that we'd like to build. We've verbally communicated with our neighbors, and they are fine with our plan. We think that the plan would fit in with the aesthetics of the neighborhood. Our neighbors trust us that we're going to make it look really nice when it's all done. Right now, it definitely looks a little funky in the middle of the rebuild stage, but we're also interested in collecting rainwater off of our shed, which we do off of our house in a rain barrel, and we want to have gutters on the shed that flow into a rain barrel and use that water to water some raised beds we have in our garden. So that would alleviate any drainage issues where water would be going into our neighbor's property and causing any erosion.
And Brian, maybe if you can go to a couple of the pictures after, below the one with the car, you can see the original structure really coinciding with the property line. So those bottom two, those are our pictures. So that's the old foundation of the garage, and you can see part of it that already fell over, and our neighbor's shed in the background. But that foundation of the garage it is, for all intents and purposes, just along the property line. There's an older stone wall just on the other side of it, where we actually found a pin at the end. That was one of the only pins we found. So the garage was basically built right on the property line. And then I think there's one more below it that may show. So some of the pictures that we took, the garage was already being deconstructed, but you can sort of see how the property line is divided.
So the new structure that you're proposing is not to the property line, but 2.5 feet from the line.
That's correct.
What are the setbacks, Brian, in the area?
Accessory structure would be 5 feet.
And 5 feet is half the half of 10 foot, which is the normal setback.
Yes, correct.
So, and I think one of the pictures that Brian took may show a little bit of the crunch in this area, but one of the reasons why, like we were saying, parking side by side is that, and if you see this on the sketch with the dimensions, it's a little bit tricky to see, but there's a very short distance between the foundation. The original garage foundation was 19 feet by 36 feet. And there's a very short distance between the edge of the foundation and the beginning of our house. So the driveway widens at the edge of it near the garage foundation. And so if you move it over, if you move the shed over 5 feet, there isn't enough room to have a car that's able to back out alongside another car, because you'd run into the house.
Can I ask a question?
Please do.
The house on the downhill side of you, how close is their garage to your property line?
That is a good question.
It's less than 5 feet.
Yeah, I would say it's less than 5 feet, which is one of the reasons we were talking about sort of the aesthetics of the neighborhood. There's a fence all along the border of our property line with the downhill neighbor.
I would say it's 2.5 feet.
That's about
It's
what
very
I would say it
close,
was
yeah.
when I was there yesterday.
Okay,
Yes.
Yeah.
it's very close to the fence. Yeah.
You're showing, on your little sketch here, you show a shed on the rear of the carport.
That's right, and that's what we're talking about. That's the
So-
shed that we're talking about building.
Would there be anything preventing you moving the shed to the full 5 feet?
I think that
Away.
I think we'd like to use the structure of the shed to build off the carport and maybe even store wood partially under the overhang. So it's just sort of building logistics.
And the foundation is still in place, or at least
The-
portions of it?
The foundation that's bordering our neighbors has actually now been removed.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can see in the...
It's kind of hard to tell there, and that is going to be rebuilt with a rock wall.
So in the garage, the foundation of the garage was really abutting this retaining wall. There was no separation, but we're going to have some retaining wall and then some buffer before the shed.
And the 2.5 feet setback from the boundary line is to the wall or to the eaves, or how you
To
consider
the
it?
wall. The
To the-
wall will, for all intents and purposes, be on the boundary line because that's where the current wall is, but it's not in good enough shape to leave.
Do you
as
mean
is.
the stone wall?
Yeah,
not
the stone
wall
wall.
of the carport.
The carport wall,
Oh,
He's talking
sorry.
about
the structure, the accessory structure. Your boundary fence or your boundary wall.
Yeah.
Um,
So this,
we're not-
the wall of the carport would be 2.5 feet from the boundary.
And do you have eaves that extend over
Oh.
on that side, or is it run the other way?
I think it runs the other way,
Yeah.
but those, yeah.
Yeah, the eaves we were envisioning going towards the street, towards Maple Street, as opposed to sloping towards their boundary.
The reason I ask is that we will, should we grant you a waiver to do this,
Yeah.
we want to take the closest point to the boundary. So if you had an eave that stuck out a foot, then it would be 1.5 feet and not 2.5
Right.
feet.
Got it.
But you think it goes the other, you're sure it goes the other way?
Yeah.
The current garage, does it have a paved floor?
The current garage has a concrete floor that's in really poor shape.
And what are you going to do with that?
We're removing that concrete and probably putting in like pea gravel. And some of it will be converted back to lawn because the footprint of the original garage is larger than what we're building.
Any other members of the board, any other questions?
So as I understand it, this is still not going to meet zoning requirements, but it'll be closer to meeting it than what you've got now.
Yes. And we hope it will be much more attractive.
Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve application 2011-099.
Second?
Any further comment from anyone? All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? I abstain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0, 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're approved. Good luck with your application, with your construction. Okay. Call application 2011-105, Latches Corporation. Gail, please come up. Please tell us about your application.
All right. Well, I'm Gail Nunziata. I'm General Manager of Latches Corporation and also Managing Director of Brattleboro Arts Initiative. And on July 11th, a truck ran into our marquee. And by July 12th, it looked like the picture that I handed out to you. And a representation of that is also in the packet. So we are in process of getting an estimate on for the insurance purposes, and also we'll be working with a design company to design a new marquee. And I'm just hoping that you will approve the same size and shape that we currently have. And it sticks out of the building. It's pretty well affixed to the building, so if you want to change it, we're in big trouble. So,
Is it cantilevered out? How does that? How does
it's,
the
well, if you look at that
structure
one
work?
picture that I did give, it's really tied into the building structure beyond the facade.
Yeah.
And those are steel beams protruding.
That is
Oh, that's
correct.
okay. There, right.
Yeah. So it doesn't just hang on the front.
Is this
It's
the
really integral to the building.
original structure?
Yes, it
This
is.
was put there in 1930
8.
something.
So do you envision taking down a lot of the wood,
Oh, yeah.
damaged wood, but
Yes.
build off
Sure.
of that
Yeah.
steel
Yeah.
structure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Square
don't
square
quite-
footage will be the same as it was?
Well, it'll be no bigger. That I can promise you, because we don't want this to happen again. Not that we expect somebody to come up on the sidewalk again, but you know, you just never know. So,
Was it lighted before? I can't remember.
yes, oh,
It was-
sure,
and
yeah.
it was
Yeah, the
downcast
pa-
lighting?
No, the panels were lit. The panels are lit
Yeah.
within them, and then there's lighting underneath it. Now, the other picture that I gave you, which is an old postcard, shows some raised up letters that were part of the marquee at one time. And as a historic structure, and as a partnership we have with the Preservation Trust of Vermont, we may be interested in restoring that look. That's part of the design process. We're not sure yet.
What do the raised up letters say? CHIS?
Oh, it said latches.
Oh, latches.
Here.
Got it. No.
Yeah. As partners with the Preservation Trust of Vermont, when Brattleboro Arts Initiative purchased the Latches from the Latches family, we went into a partnership with the Preservation Trust, and we have historic preservation easements on certain historic parts of the building. And the facade is included. The marquee is certainly a part of that. So, and the marquee had a fairly modest design before, and we expect to have also a fairly modest outcome. Hopefully, bright, new, modern, but we can't go off into flights of fancy with all kinds of different.
So you see the same type of. I mean, I'm not sure whether this is correct, but the letters hung there, or you took a ladder and put the letters up there.
We do it with a ladder. We're working with some design companies to find out if there are ways that we can do it so the guys don't have to go up on a ladder, because they'd rather not at this point. But that's unknown right now. There, you can hang the individual letters. The letters also, you can get them that are on loose side cards, and they go up with like a suction. So you can do it from the ground and just suction them up onto the marquee. Just remains to be seen. But we want it to look good. So
But you see a similar
yes.
historic-looking,
Oh yes.
identical. Let's say for a second identical, even if it isn't quite. Looking sign as a cinema marquee or
Correct.
theatre marquee.
Correct.
Have you observed or have heard of observations about how close a truck is when its tires are, say, scraping the curb?
Too close. I
mean,
don't know.
Like, is it just sheer luck that it hasn't been hit before now?
Oh, it has been hit before.
It has been
Oh,
hit
yes.
before.
Yes, as a matter of fact, Jim Latches is here. It's just by coincidence.
Yeah,
And I hope,
it was hit about 5 or 6 times the years I ran through. And I couldn't get a higher curb done no matter what. It seemed like the town was waiting for something to hit that marquee. They wouldn't raise the sidewalk, they wouldn't put a post there, they wouldn't protect it in any way.
Well,
And it's been there since 1938.
I realize it would certainly be an added expense to cut off the end of that steel coming out and then reattach it maybe 6 inches less or something. It just seems there's something that seems a little absurd about rebuilding something in the same place where it has been hit 5 or 6 times already.
What is the height of the sign, the bottom of the sign?
Oh, well, I'll
Off the
have
street.
to look it up. The height from the street and the bottom of the
Or from the
sign.
from the sidewalk, rather.
Yeah, from the sidewalk. It's in your packet here. And the marquee is 16 feet
She's probably talking about
from the ground to the top of the sign.
And the height of the sign?
And the height of the sign is 4 1/4 feet.
A semi can run as high, legally, as high as 13.6. So it certainly will never go under it. And I think perhaps part of the problem is that streets are center crown. They're highest in the middle and then slope down, so all vehicles lean a little bit. And that amount that the truck is leaned at the 13.5 foot is more, even if the marquee comes, in other words, if the marquee came out even with the edge of the curb, a truck would very likely hit it or scrape it, even if it were in the street, because the top of the truck would be leaning in towards it as it passed. And it just...
Well, we are not in the design phase right now. We are... I still haven't gotten a cost to submit to the insurance company. So I expect that will, determine somewhat what our budget might be at some point. And in this particular instance, the truck was on the sidewalk.
Well, yes, I understand that.
So we hope that no trucks ever drive on the sidewalk. If your trucks are out there listening to me right now, don't drive on the sidewalk.
What?
Yeah,
Well-
I would say that every time it was hit previously, the tires were on the sidewalk. Because they weren't on the road. They were parking for delivery one time to the public market across the street with a beverage truck. I don't remember all the details, but they were, the trucks were definitely up on the sidewalk.
We actually have security video footage of this event. And clearly, the truck was on the sidewalk.
So how
Okay.
much, what difference would it make as far as the, historic with the arts council and everything? If you were to make it 13.5 feet, not 16.5 feet, will it make a difference from that point of view?
I think it probably would.
Yeah.
I think it probably would. But more than that, Igor, as valid as that, we now have 4 theaters. When the building was built, there was 1 theater. And now we have 4 theaters, and we barely have enough room to advertise what's happening in the 4 theaters on that. So I really hesitate to think that we're going to make it smaller. But my purpose here today is to just see if I can have it approved for the original size, the size that it currently exists at.
From the standpoint of keeping trucks off the sidewalk, I would prefer, although it's not
Spikes?
Not spikes, but not just a bollard.
Yeah.
If there was an appropriately placed bollard on the corner of the sidewalk there, that would certainly, I don't know whether there are any street lights or anything on that side,
Yeah.
but that would certainly prevent people
That's
pulling
not
out.
within our jurisdiction.
It certainly isn't
Right,
within
and
our
it's
jurisdiction,
not
but
within mine today either.
that would be one way of preventing people driving onto the curb.
I have a question, sir.
Sure, please do.
Brian, I noticed in the draft decision there's a reference to theater marquee signs in existence on the date of the adoption of the bylaw in Urban Center. I may have an outdated zoning ordinance, but I didn't see it. Is it in the 2348? Is that what that is, or is it in the signs?
It's in the sign section.
It's the sign section. Okay. I'll find it. So there's a specific exception for really this sign.
Yes.
Yeah, that this marquee shall remain in existence.
In terms of our current, Brian, in terms of our current sign ordinance and the square footage of this sign, how far is it off noticeably, dramatically?
It would depend how you classify it. As a wall sign would probably be allowable. As a projection sign would be too large.
A lot.
Yeah,
But as a wall sign?
I think it would be permissible.
Do we take into account the entire footage of the hotel, or just the little portion that's the theatre?
Well, the footage is.
Could be either way.
Determining the building's entire sign budget.
Oh, I see. It's 4555B3. Theater marquee signs in existence on the date of adoption of this bylaw may remain as permitted uses.
So this will be backlit, is it? I must say
We
I'm
don't
not,
know yet what it will be.
but it was backlit before it was hit.
Yes,
So we would have a white background with black letters,
exactly.
exactly as this piece here.
It- Presumably.
Gosh.
Not allowed. Wouldn't think so.
No.
It will not look like the ticker that goes on Times Square.
Have you,
I promise you that.
could you just briefly talk about should you wish to put larches back on top in
Yes.
I don't know what you call that kind of lighting.
LED, most likely.
It would be LED. you
Yeah,
think, rather
they were
than
neons.
Neons. They were
I'm
neons
assuming,
originally.
right? Yeah, they were neon, and I would say we probably would not replicate that.
So you might put latches on each side or across the top. So
Yeah.
we would increase the size of the sign
Mm-hmm.
doing that.
The height, yeah.
And if we look at the structure of the building and the height of the sign, it sort of sits underneath the windowsills of the floor above,
Yes.
and then drops down to look like a little lower than the window lintels of the floor below. If you were to shrink it a little bit with that, is that possible, do you think?
Well, it goes to this problem we have with being able to advertise the amount of activity that we have down there at the Latches. So we certainly don't want to take away any lines of text, if possible.
Can the lines of text get closer?
I don't know about that quite yet. I mean, the height of a letter is the height of a letter.
Any other questions from any member of the board?
Why neon and not LED? I mean, why LED and not neon?
I think LED is probably much more energy efficient, and it's available, where it wasn't before. In some ways, it's the industry standard. Some people do like to go back, if they have if they have neon, they want to maintain their neon. But since we no longer have neon, I think we have some different options available to us.
Any member of Bob? I saw you. Thank you.
Bob Stevens. I had a question for the board, sitting here listening to this conversation, and wanted to confirm that this application actually needs a permit. It's an existing sign, and it sounds like you're entitled to keep an existing marquee. It needs to be rebuilt, but it's not a new It's not a new use or a new sign, so, again, I didn't read the ordinance, but it was just a question to confirm the fact that you needed a permit for this, to rebuild an existing sign.
Generally, if we have non-conforming signs, and I'm not sure this is non-conforming, we would look for a 50% reduction towards the standard, the affectionately known Herrick rule. But it's not clear to me this is non-conforming.
I wouldn't say.
It seems to me that his yeah.
But I think that the consideration and approval of additional signage above the existing signage would require
a permit. Any other members of the public like to speak to this application? In this, in the application you have here, the paperwork you have here, there's no mention of the additional LED letters at above the sign.
That is true.
What's the board's feeling that we should?
I'll leave that to administrative approval or consultation with the chair.
I think you could appeal it on the basis that it's already been approved.
What's that?
Back when the ordinance was written, it was approved.
No, they actually make specific mention, and I didn't read that part, but they make specific mention that at the time of the drafting of the bylaw, which approved the sign, it said, "Thou shalt take down the letters above and below the sign, the existing sign." So for some reason, in 1968, it was offensive, and they were told to take that sign down, but I don't see any reason why not to
Where do you find
reinstall it.
4555 B3.
4555
B3.
The portion that I excerpted was 54.
4555.
That portion says, any additional signs either hanging below or placed above the marquee shall be removed as they are not considered part of the marquee.
So technically, is the marquee a wall sign? It's not. It's a marquee. What would a sign above a marquee be considered? That's attached to a marquee. It's not a wall sign.
It's undefined.
Undefined. I love
A
it.
marquee is a marquee.
Yeah. But I'd be comfortable with the administrative approval,
Yeah,
chair,
okay.
Consultation.
Any other comments or questions from the? No. So with the condition that should you wish to place historic looking LED letters, largest sign above the existing marquee, that you come back to, not to the board, but for administrative approval with consultation with the chair. I'm looking for a motion to approve application 2011-105.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Right, now it's 601. Okay. Moving on. Pleasure. I call application 2011-106. Pete Thiessen. Please come forward and tell us about your application.
I'm Pete Thiessen, and this is my brother Mac, and he's going to represent and explain the application that we're submitting to the board tonight.
I I believe you all have a copy of the plan, and what we're looking to do is to subdivide a 5.9 acre lot into 2 lots. One being the original lot with the house, and that would be approximately 4.2 acres. And the new lot created to the north of the house would have a road frontage minimum of 150, and overall length varying between 430 feet and 600 feet down to the brook. And that new lot would be approximately 1.75 acres. There's no plan for a building at this point in time, and the property would not be marketed out until after the house was sold, because it's possible that somebody purchasing that property might want the lot as a buffer, as opposed to peeling off the lot and selling that out first. But I believe we meet all the minimum standards, as I understand them, for this single lot subdivision in the current zoning that's allowed in that neighborhood.
So if I was to look at this plan here, there's a sort of 40-foot setback line.
Yep.
That's off of the side of the road, or off of the side of, maybe it's from the...
We just showed the setback, and that creates the building envelope.
Where's the property line then in the subdivision? Does it come right to the road?
Yes, it would. We didn't show that because we showed the building envelope, but you would just close that line to the road.
Okay. And this parcel of land, how do you access this parcel of land? Will there be a curb cut from the road?
It'll be a curb cut from Upper Dumbarton Road. There actually was a curb cut there years ago. Of course, it's not really a curb cut. There's no curb up there, but you have access.
Driveway access.
Yeah. There actually was years ago a driveway access to the north here.
Next question, Brian?
Sure.
Brian, do outside of town and outside of the areas in which there are curbs, does DPW still approve a curb cut?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Have they opined about this application?
No, they haven't.
And the frontage, the 293.33 is
That's
frontage on the lot, not
that
not
goes
the parcel.
to just to the south of the house. You'll see a pin there.
Okay. So Brian, the frontage is 150 in that rural residential?
Yes.
150 minimum?
It would be 150 minimum. It may very well be when we have the surveyor push that out. It might go out to 160.
I assume there's a septic and drilled well. There's no municipal
For the current
service.
home.
And then you'll be putting a septic and a drilled well for
Correct.
this, no municipal services out there.
There are.
Yeah. Have you perked that area? Did you have an idea of where the septic would go?
The down in relationship to where the septic system is for the current house.
Yeah.
That's all. There's a sand belt that runs right through there.
Where's the septic for the current house?
If you were to take that line on the south side, it's got a 25-foot side yard setback.
Yeah.
It's in that approximate vicinity right there. Be at the base of the hill, basically. There's a little knoll right there. Be at the base of that knoll.
And the current septic would remain on the
Current septic is not a
retained lot?
Yeah, it would be a shared septic system.
Okay.
Two separate systems.
And you don't envision having to put the new septic on the other lot?
No.
On the retained lot?
No.
Okay.
What is the, you're showing a building envelope here. What is this, there's a sort of wavy line in the back of the building envelope? Is that the
Top of the
topology of
bank.
the land is, it falls away or
Yeah,
climbs up?
that's a tree line. That's just part of the original survey. And that's basically the top of bank. Because that's all an open field out there, and so that wiggly line represents the wooded area.
So there's a tree bank that runs down to the brook. Is it the brook that's at the rear here? Is it water at the rear?
Correct.
Yeah.
If you look at that picture that's up on the screen, you can see that wooded area at the top of the bank. And you're looking off
Yeah, I
to
see
the east.
that.
You made some mention of not selling this lot unless the other one's sold. So is there a
No, I don't,
covenant?
I don't believe that we'll sell this, market this lot until the house is sold. In the event that somebody purchasing the house would like this land as additional buffer.
Okay, so there's not a covenant on the lot that prevents it being sold. It's just.
That's the way that we choose to
That's
do
the way
it.
that you're
We
considering
anticipate
doing it.
Yes.
Do you anticipate subdividing but not selling, or pulling the subdivision from it, figuring out what the buyer wants to do, and then either subdividing and selling the retained lot?
What we want to do is we want to receive permission to be able to create this lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
But will you create the lot, and then somebody will buy 2 lots possibly, or will you? Because once you've created the lot, it will say a separate
I
lot.
understand
Even if they're
that.
under common ownership, they're not going to merge back in, and then that person could presumably sell the
That's
lot.
fine.
Yeah. But you anticipate that timing, or so
I would
subdividing?
anticipate going through the subdivision.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other members of the board questions for the applicant? Any members of the public have wished to speak to this application? Please come forward.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Chris Chapman. I live on the road in the neighborhood. These are fellas I've known since I was a child. We were all raised on the road in our respective houses.
Chris, can I hold you for 1 second? Were you in the room when the oath was taken originally?
When the oath was taken, no, I
Yeah.
arrived here at about 7:15. Should I
Yeah.
swear?
If you'd like to, I hereby affirm that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration should be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of pleasure. I do.
I am happy to affirm that so, and
Thank
yes,
you.
I do.
Thank you. Please continue.
Sure. Would ask that the board actually determine that the site plan is not complete yet and doesn't meet the requirements of section 1556A of the zoning ordinance, because more information is needed to determine if this is a viable subdivision. I think that the drawing that you have is incomplete. And this isn't to try to start a fight with my former neighbors, but we who live around the property are concerned about exactly what the property would look like in the event the subdivision were approved and in the event another building were envisioned to go on it. From the map that you have, and from which I have a photocopy that came in 4 chopped pieces, it's hard to confirm the dimensions of the acreage of the new parcel. We can't determine if there is frontage from looking at that, or if it is adequate based upon where the lines are drawn. We'd like to know where would driveway access to this new parcel be? Would it be envisioned that the existing driveway be used? Southerly and westerly boundary lines of the parcel don't run to the street. Drainage patterns and natural features are not shown. There is, in fact, quite a steep embankment on the entire property to the east, quite steep. And you may see reference to a waterfall there, and I would point out that that's quite a spectacular waterfall, mainly because the embankment is so very steep. It's steep down from the direction of the road, and also it's steep along the course of the brook that goes roughly parallel to the road. And if you were to make a site visit, you'd see that that waterfall is Upper Dummerston Road's little Yosemite Falls. It's absolutely beautiful. I'd say that's the nicest part of the property. It's quite a distinguishing feature. Our concern is that it is so steep that it should be noted on on a plat that's approved. The tree line is roughly where the embankment begins, all along the property. The contours of land are not shown on the map, and it should, I think, be noted that the parcel has quite a steep configuration. It's quite difficult to go down the embankment, just clambering down. Existing water, septic tanks, and leach fields and culverts are not shown on what you have. A proposed building site is shown, but not a building envelope to determine the functionality or feasibility of a subdivision. It's not clear that septic and water is available for this site. And even if no building is now proposed, can the parcel support water and other waste disposal? Another omission is that abutting property owners across the street are not shown on the plan. The abutters include Jonathan Seacrest and his wife, and Peter Schofield and his wife, Kathy Eakins. Also, a vicinity map is not shown pursuant to the subdivision rules. Form F is required. That wasn't shown on the information that was forwarded to me by Mr. Bannon at my phoned request. I wonder if Form P had been pulled from the file. We understand that Form F will be required at the time of final plat approval, and we would think that the applicant should be required to include that information. So we do have some concerns here. It's a concern not only by neighbors who, by us neighbors who are concerned about changing the look of the neighborhood, but also we'd think that this application should be all according to Hoyle because it's so important to the entire neighborhood. We realize that the landowner has his rights under the subdivision law. We would like to make sure that everything is according to Hoyle if this is to be approved. I think that's quite a reasonable request. And I'd like to conclude also by repeating that I have good wishes for Pete. It's not easy to take care of real estate from a distance. In fact, when you're talking about a house that's 50 or more years old, it's hard to take care of property when you live on it, especially here in Vermont where things weather so much. But it's a matter of concern to us because we would like very much to have the character of the neighborhood unchanged, and we're concerned that a shotgun-type subdivision like this would be quite a substantial change in terms of abutters across the street, and to the north, being Linda Bailey and her husband, Edwin De Bruyne. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, just where Linda Bailey's property is. Sorry.
Where it says estate of Ralph Chapman. This was a survey done in 1991. When my father's estate was being settled in 91, we had that property surveyed, and Pete and Mal's father, Forrest, also hired the same surveyor to survey his own property. So I have absolutely no problem with the survey lines shown. They were as agreed and confirmed by a surveyor, not jointly hired, but hired separately to look at the respective properties and where a consistent ownership line was affirmed.
Okay, but I guess your point is that technically this plan is not correct from the standpoint of the current abutters.
We're saying it, well, I'm saying it's incomplete.
Incomplete.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I think that should be pretty apparent.
Thank you.
So can I ask a question?
Of me?
Yes, please.
Sure.
I don't have a list of all your questions, and I'm afraid I wasn't writing them as you were speaking.
Oh, I might be able to just get them.
But in any case, one that
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
one that struck me as you began was a concern about the location of the driveway. And I'm looking at the map in front of me, and I'm wondering, since presumably it can't go into the former estate of your father's.
You could. No objection from me.
Well, if you let it, if you allowed it, but what is the concern that you have about the location of the driveway, given the location of the street and the lot and the, where could the driveway possibly go which would cause a concern of what nature?
I wonder, and perhaps Kathy Eakins and Peter Schofield could speak to that, is how close that driveway might be to their driveway, and concern on the part of Linda Bailey and Edwin DeBruyne about how close it could be to their property, which abuts. I don't know what their feeling is about it. None of us who live around there was informed of this, or shown the map, other than the minimal notification required of the applicants to the abutters. I am not actually an abutter. My wife's and my property line comes a little bit to the north. We abut to the north of Mr. Schofield and Ms. Eakins, who own across the street from this plot. Now, I'm not sure I answered your question.
I think as much as you could.
Yes, okay. Well, Mrs. Bailey is here, and Peter and his wife are here also. And perhaps they could answer that question in some detail for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Peter, would you like to speak to?
Peter Schofield, my wife Catherine Eakins.
Did you come in?
I came afterwards.
Okay. Is there anybody else that wishes to? Thank you. Yeah, let's just do it one more time if we can. I hereby affirm that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration should be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury. I do.
I do.
Thank you very much.
Again, my name is Peter Schofield, my wife Catherine Eakins. We are actually abutters directly across the street from this proposed subdivision. I'd like to speak to the rural character of the neighborhood. There's been some forethought years before any of us were here. Chris Chapman's father divided Linda's property and Edwin's property and put covenants on that piece of property to keep it in a rural setting. Our actual piece of property was built by Dr. Stevens. He bought some extra property to lock up a right-of-way that would prevent any further subdivisions or land being divided up behind us. So the neighborhood is rural residential, and it's the feeling of the abutters here that that's the way we'd like to keep it. To speak to character of the land, this flat piece of paper that everybody has in front of them really doesn't do justice to this piece of land. If we take the piece of land and subdivide it off that's proposed here, it ends up being an okay lot, but it leaves the house with it's bastardizing that original property that the house sits on. You're leaving that piece of property with a postage stamp piece of usable property, because the rest of the acreage is very steep embankment, 40 to 50 to 60 foot drop-offs at angles that you couldn't walk up and down. So the original house gets left with a real small piece of usable property, although it has the acreage needed for the subdivision. I don't believe that any of the people that years ago that lived in this neighborhood really thought about, would somebody eventually subdivide this property. We're trying to keep it in a rural character, and that's what we're trying to do tonight. It probably meets the requirements needed for a subdivision, but there's objections from, I think, all the abutters.
Thank you.
Can I speak to that, please?
Let's hear from the. We'll come back and pick that up. Anybody else like to speak to this application? So, do we have a? There's a number of points have been raised. Do we have an acreage split?
Yeah, I mentioned that when I first spoke.
Yeah, I didn't. Unfortunately, I didn't note it down. So
I said that
5.9.
the existing house would be left with a 4.2 acre parcel, and the lot being
4.2. You said?
Yeah, and the lot being created, or approximately 4 acres, and the lot being created would be 1.75. And if you look on the photo that's on the screen right there, you're actually looking at the proposed lot. And, you're looking east, and you can see there's a considerable distance from the road to that tree line, which you're looking on a knoll here, which would be where the house would be built, and then it drops off down to another plateau and follows that off to the top of the bank, and the top of the bank is at least 300 feet from the road. I appreciate your comments relative to the brook. The brook is an asset to this property. We enjoyed fishing in it for years, and the waterfall is a beautiful asset to that. But the comment relative to a postage stamp to the existing lot, I beg to differ on the basis that the land to the south and where the old curve of the road used to be is all part of this property. And there will still be road frontage that's relatively level of 600 feet or more. So you're going to have, and then that goes to the top of the bank, you're going to have, there's a pine grove up in there that my father had always talked about putting a house up in. It's a little bit of a bank, but it still could be utilized, and that's not being affected. That's being parceled off with the original house. And this is something my father actually had talked about doing years ago as he aged. He and my mother were going to put a ranch-style home on that knoll so that they could live in that house until they died. They ended up living in their existing house until they passed away, both of them. And I don't think it's that uncharacteristic with a neighborhood. I mean, nobody likes change. My father took a long time for him to get used to the lights out in the field and the new house that was built out there. And it took time for him to get used to your house, Peter, across the street. I mean, nobody likes change. But all we're trying to do is create a simple single-lot subdivision. We believe we meet the criteria. And as I say, perhaps the purchaser of the house may or may not acquire the property and leave it in its existing condition.
Can you just address the curb cut thing, the entrance? Just where
well,
would that be?
The site visibility here is quite good. You've got, I mean, we would be at least 200 feet from the existing driveway, but I don't know exactly on that 150 feet where there's the curb cut will be. It's fairly level on the road right there. There's no hazard visibility, sight distance visibility that would mandate it be pushed one way or the other. It's a fairly open curb cut. I don't think we'd line it up directly with the driveway across the street because that might create a little bit of a problem. But aside from that, I don't see any driving factor that would impact any property or visibility or safety.
Okay. Brian, do you have a picture of the house, like to the south? Not sure that helps.
Where you're looking right there in the foreground is the mailbox.
Yeah.
That's where the existing driveway is.
Yeah. And that sweeps off the road and sweeps around to the front.
The existing driveway actually drops down below the house. The garage is under the house.
Any questions,
No, Brian, you felt that it's from the zoning administrator's discretion to determine if there are any waivers to the items identified in the subdivision site plan criteria, and you felt that those were appropriate waivers, the information that you did not see from the applicant?
The information submitted, I thought, was sufficient to consider the application.
Thank you.
Did you have a complete abutters list? 'Cause just as they aren't listed on this plan, I'm just
Julia did the
to be sure that everyone was notified.
Yes, she praised her on this.
Okay. Do we do these sketch and final all at the same time then?
Yeah, in a minor,
Yeah.
with probably here with the condition that
This is
the
updated.
site plan be, a recordable plat be recorded in the land records within, what do we say, 3 months usually?
Yeah, 90 days.
90 days, and probably that a curb cut be approved prior to any development. I don't know if we got that one.
On the curb cut, can that be a stipulation on the building permit?
I would envision it would be a condition to development. Prior to any land development on the site, you'd have to get approval of a curb cut from the DPW.
By land development, you mean improvements to the site?
Yeah, construction.
Right.
Construction of the house.
I understand.
So you need, and that wouldn't come before this board, that'd go before.
No, I assume that would be part of the permit that would be submitted for building.
Yeah, right.
That goes to Public Works. Yes, Peter, please step up.
Is it two more topics of discussion? I would, one, ask the board, do you ever, you must, go visit sites to walk the site and to look at what's actually happening? You get a better feel actually looking at the site versus, again, looking at a flat piece of paper.
I was there yesterday.
Were you? Do you understand what I'm saying when I'm saying the house is the original estate is left with a very small usable piece of property? Is that no concern to the board? Or and the other question I have is it possible to establish a stipulation or request a stipulation we put on this piece of property with what's actually built as a construction for a new house, for a new dwelling?
Only that it has a maximum of 2 apartments or something.
Yeah,
Can't be
the
more than
size
60
the
feet.
size and type of structure that's built there is defined in terms of the zoning code just defines the number of residences that can be there. So it could be I think it can be, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but it can be up to a two-family home, is it?
With administrative approval, it could be up to 2, but the board could approve up to 4 units.
Yeah. With so it could potentially be a two-family home. There's that without further approval. But we have no design standards in this town, so we can't stipulate that it's going to be, 2-story, 1-story, painted in any shape or form, or of any type of structure.
I guess our immediate concern is that we don't end up with a house trailer or a double wide across the street. We have them.
There's actually a prohibition on the discrimination against trailers.
I know that, you can't discriminate.
So, but it's not within our power to make that condition.
Yeah, please come forward. What was your
I haven't been sworn. Jonathan Seacrest. Excuse me.
Oh, okay.
But I so swear, unless you want to ask me.
Thank you.
I just wanted to. I'm an abutter. I'm just around the corner from this, and I just wanted to reiterate for myself, not my opposition to the subdivision. I understand, you all are the petitioners are well within their rights to subdivide as long as they meet the criteria. And my only concern is that looking at that drawing as presented, I find it difficult to see how the boundaries are delineated consistent with the requirements of the statute. And so I think it would be advisable and helpful for the board and helpful for abutters and other interested parties to have a better description that where those requirements are not waived administratively, but where we can have more than just some brief ad hoc hand drawings to really have a better idea of exactly what that parcel looks like. And I think that would be helpful for the board as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Chris. Yeah, sure.
Very much. I wonder if we could just double check and see that absolutely all the abutters have been notified. I'm wondering if Dr. Dunham, who has a parcel that runs behind several houses, including one of the abutters, Mr. and Mrs. Henske, he may be an abutter also, and I'd like to make sure that he was notified. He and his wife are quite aged, and I'd like this not to get beyond them if indeed they had any concern, or even if they knew about this. Is it possible to ascertain that they were notified?
Yes.
Yeah, would you mind?
Yeah, I'm not sure that they are abutters. I suspect so, though, because they have quite an extensive parcel. I'm sorry? And what I thought might be helpful is to just show something that I pulled off of the internet. It's from Google Maps, which has an admittedly crude topographical illustration of the subject property. And I think that it might be helpful to submit this to the board for its review, because I think that it will underscore the remarks that I made earlier and that Mr. Schofield made earlier, that there is quite a steep embankment, and that embankment makes it really impossible to view that entire 1 3/4 acre lot as a buildable lot. Maybe a portion of it is, maybe technically it does fit on a piece of paper as a buildable lot, but when you look at contours, I think you're going to find that will at the very least raise your eyebrows. May I submit this?
Sure, please do. Just bring it forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's probably very similar to the documentation that's in our package.
I'm not in any position as an expert witness to say, but you can see that there is quite a drop-off there.
I think that's the same. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? That's your house there in that picture?
Yes,
When was that built?
1947. 49,
1949?
yes.
And you've lived there ever since?
Well,
We did up
we were
until-
raised there,
We left in the mid-60s.
Yeah.
but it's been our family
It's
home
been the family house since it was built.
The top of that embankment, however, that is raising a concern here is at least 300 feet distance or more from the roadway. So the house is certainly not going to be built on the top of the bank.
Do you know what the setback of the house is? About
Pardon
40
me? It
About
probably-
40 feet?
Yeah,
That's at least 40 feet.
Is there a picture of that waterfall? In our packet.
We'll just give Brian a couple more minutes to go find his paperwork.
I've got a question for John, if you don't mind. John, were you, when you were referring to the survey here, were you concerned that the representation of the envelope here is not accurate? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's not that I was making any claim that it's not accurate. It's just that I didn't think, and this isn't an area I practice in, so with due apologies, I'll defer to the expertise of the board. It just seems to me as a layperson that that the drawing of the boundaries wasn't clear to me in terms of distance or acreage or offsets.
Okay.
So I can't represent the accuracy of it at all, but I just can't tell from this.
Well, your offsets are clearly marked.
I mean, were those done by surveys? How were they measured?
This plat is to scale. We scaled off the plat.
For some reason, I was under the understanding that this was hand-drawn after the survey.
The only thing that's hand-drawn is the southern property line, which, once it's approved, we'll have a surveyor close it off and pin it.
So I defer to the expertise of the board in terms of what's requisite.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, please.
I think one of the issues that we're having here is Peter and Mac are looking, and the board is looking at a full-size map, and we're looking at, an 8 by 10 it's kind of chopped up. So what we're actually looking at is if we stuck it all together, we might end up with something like you have, but it's very hard to. Thank you.
So was there a satisfactory notification?
To the parties that were raised by Chris just now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Okay, for a motion. Any other questions from the board?
No.
So we're looking for a motion to approve application 2011-106 with the following.
I think we get the condition on the access permit. The curb that we have already.
On default.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
The-
we have recognition in it. Over there.
Actually, there's a condition in here already that state permits may be required. The committee should contact agencies to determine what permits may be obtained before any construction may commence. So you'll have to contact DPW to get a curb cut approval. And then obviously we'll need a fully surveyed plot to be updated to meet the requirements or the elements of this plan that you've shown us that are currently incomplete for filing with the town. Anyway, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the application 2011-106. All those in favour?
Second.
Seconded, Dr. Chard. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Passes 6, 0, 0. 601. Is that correct? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Call application 2011-107.
Maybe they came back. Did they have this subdivision one before?
We did it. We passed it last time.
Did we? Yeah, subdivision.
Steve ended up signing it a little bit after you did.
Was the house with them? Sure.
Oh yeah, didn't matter. Please tell us about this part of the project.
Thank you. I'm Bob Stevens from Stevens & Associates.
Adam Hubbard, and I work with Bob at Stevens & Associates.
John Chase, applicant.
So this is an application that may look very familiar to you because we've been through, should have shared this with you a few times. It is a reincarnation of the original planned unit development that was brought before this board and approved and then reconsidered and simplified, and we're now trying to bring it back through for a planned residential development instead of a planned unit development. We're here tonight to request final plat approval for the plat that has been prepared that reflects the PRD. So this application is a culmination of the previous submittals. The preliminary plat, you saw a concept design as well as a set of development standards. Those we were representing are part of the guidelines that should govern how this property gets developed in the future, as well as we would anticipate similar set of conditions that we had asked for as part of the planned unit development. Just to remind you that this is a multi-step process. The planned residential development in this case now creates effectively the ability to develop in this form and manner, but we still need to get a subdivision approval for all of the development that would happen and site plan approval as well. So we are anticipating the condition that no development will occur until that subdivision approval is obtained, as well as site plan approvals. And quite frankly, we have a half a dozen state permits to get as well. But this would establish effectively the zone and establish the development standards and the concept that we've brought through before, which is this concept here. Maybe I should get all these running in the same direction. So, same concept, same development standards, I think was before you for preliminary plat. And the only change is now on the final plat, we have developed the design a little bit further than the last time. And in order to accurately define at least the roadways and the rights of ways. And Adam, maybe I can ask you to walk through that. If you're more familiar with it than I am.
So on the concept plan, we have, well, as we stated in previous hearings, the developable portion of the land is a plateau that sits above Brookside Condominiums, and the roadway that we propose is to come off of Brookside Terrace and wind up the hill, and we put some effort into understanding how that roadway would lay out, and in addition to give access to this back parcel here. Similarly, we've defined the right-of-way that will provide yet a third emergency services access behind the skating rink from Memorial Park, and then south of the Clark House and into this secondary access. This was the secondary access. And so those on the survey here have been defined for the final plat and the plan of record. There's the roadway up with right-of-way to the back of the lot and right-of-way behind the Clark House.
So this plat, which gets recorded, would reflect and memorialize those accesses and rights of way in. If, again, when the project proceeds and before any development occurs, additional subdivisions would be defined to define actual individual parcels where you're actually going to build, the common space, the trail, all of which is included conceptually and anticipated to be built part of this, but the exact location of that bike path would have to be designed around the stormwater detention and some of the other site utilities that have to get worked into the site. So that in total is the application. We're looking at the plat, which defines where the PRD is by meets and bounds, the rights of way through that, and then the development standards for the planned residential development were submitted with a preliminary plat, which includes the booklet, the design standards, and the concept development plan as part of how the property would get developed as it goes forward.
I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
The first is, could you just take just so I'm sure, take a highlighter to that or a pen to that print up there and show us what the boundaries of the PRD are? I don't have a highlighter or a pen, but
I do have a highlighter.
you do. So that the northern, the 26.16 acres are not in, the top chunk is not in this PRD. That line that's going across to the south, that line there is the southern border of the PRD.
That's the southern border of the PRD.
The property line?
The property line here.
Yep.
The Clark House is going to remain a standalone parcel.
So that's out.
That's out.
But there's a right-of-way across there to Memorial Park.
There's a right-of-way across from Memorial Park into the parcel.
Okay.
There's a right-of-way. The Brookside Drive is a town road.
Yep.
And comes to the end of this driveway that accesses the Clark House, and there's a right-of-way here. Right-of-way access there. This is the southern boundary of Brookside Condominiums.
Yep.
This is a standalone lot here, island parcel, the Runyon parcel, and in between the Brookside Condominiums and the Runyons, there's another right-of-way with some frontage on Brookside Drive. So here's the outline of the parcel there. Mr. Chase's homestead lot has been subdivided out in the previous application. It's a 1 acre parcel. And then there's a 50-foot right-of-way on the Runyon parcel and on Mr. Chase's parcel to ensure that the grading can be achieved to get the road across those two parcels, and then this right-of-way begins here.
To clarify, that's a 100-foot right-of-way width through those two.
So you got 50 on each parcel.
Right.
And then it runs down on the back of Mr. Chase's parcel to the brook?
Does include the PRD parcel does include the brook. and frontage on Route 9.
Yep.
It's quite a lot, isn't it? And then this is the sort of lower area that would be dedicated to open space, and this is the trail. The intention of the trail is to skirt the toe of the slope here and access this lower area where there's some wetlands and access to the brook. And then here's the clean western boundary.
Okay. And then for the development, let's just call it the footprint of the book, the high density or cluster development higher up there. The footprint of that is defined where? Are we leaving that to site plan, are we?
We're leaving that to site plan approval, yeah.
And subdivision approval. What happens is that what you're approving is a set of development standards that, first of all, they require a number of things: the amount of open space, the amount of development, the density of the development is all in there, and it's driven entirely by topography. To be honest with you, it's really the only place you can build is on that plateau.
So is there any way of delineating that or bringing that out on this plat? Or I mean, for example, what are the setbacks from the edge of the property? How close can that development get to the edge of the property within this PRD?
50 feet is the setback for a PRD, and so there would be a 50-foot
all the way around.
All the way around. Yeah. The topography would restrict development on the slope, and wetlands and lowlands would restrict development on this lower parcel.
So as part of the subdivision process, when you actually design the rest of the roads, and you define where the edge of the roads are and the utilities that encompass that, and then you define where the lots are, those boundary lines effectively then determine where that developable area is. So in a sense, it's we're back into that argument of as we had said before, when we started this process way long time ago, we tried to get the PUD established before doing the subdivision. It's a logical question because it would be answered if we were getting the subdivision approval. You would have meets and bounds, boundary lines for all of those lots, but because we're deferring that, we don't have that information because we haven't completed that design. That requires really the design of roads, utilities, grading around the units. Then you're going to put the lines in around that, and that's going to determine where that boundary is.
Well,
conceptually, it's here, and at the end of the day, you're going to end up with 50% open space, 50% developable, all of those standards that have been built into that sort of thing book.
I guess to some degree that's my question or dilemma. Is the cart first or the horse first? The horse first. We're not subdividing it, but we're approving a PRD final plat that has a lot of waivers or unknowns in it, as we have done all the way down this process. And we've gone one step further. We've got roads now. We have an emergency exit which deals with some of the concerns, although I want to talk about that again a bit more in a second. In terms of open space, it would be nice, we would typically at this point have decided where the open space is.
What you have is a request for an approval for the PRD, and not a waiver, but a deferral of the rest of those questions. So I think what we would suggest is that we haven't, all of those questions will have to get answered before we develop anything. But we've just asked to get approval on the first step now in order to come back and answer the questions of delineating exactly where the lots are going to be. We're not asking to not do that, just asking to defer that to later. So again, we don't have, with this approval, with this blessing, you're right, we have not shown you where those lots are, but you also haven't given us a permit to build anything. You've given us a permit to have a concept approved as a development standard, and how that gets developed is outlined in that book. But you have not given us a permit to go build a house. So that's really the trade-off that we've asked for, and we've sort of acted with, leading up to now and in the previous PUD, that yes, you're right, you don't have that specificity, but we also don't have a permit to build any of this stuff. We have to come back to you for that. Does that make sense?
And I'll add, sort of by way of anecdote, what we've seen in the past is gone through a full design of a project for a PUD or a PRD, only to get to a certain point in time where that plan changes dramatically, and those costs associated with developing an entire plan for an entire parcel, only to change the plan at a later date, is an extreme burden on a landowner, and that's just a function of the way the bylaws are set.
I guess in some ways that we already know, because of the topography, where the development is going to take place. We also know where the open space is going to be, to some degree. I mean, I think you're stating that there's a lot of open space at the bottom of the lot, adjacent to the brook.
Right.
There may well be other open space or common space in and amongst the development, which is indeterminate at this point. But what prevents us from defining, say, the open space at the bottom as being open space? Because I don't want you guys to come back. I don't think we do. When we go to site plan or subdivision, so actually we've changed our plan now.
Yeah.
We want to put more stuff down the bottom.
If it would make you feel more comfortable. I mean, one of the things that we could do is effectively take this concept plan and turn it into, say a PUD.
PRD.
Sorry, thank you. PRD. Let's call it a development plan, for lack of better words. The hospital, we basically, well, in the hospital we went further, but when that PUD, we sort of designated sort of big dash lines and said, this is this character area, this is that character area. We're sort of perhaps talking different language. When we put a line on the drawing that's a meets and bounds, a boundary line, it's very specific. That we're probably not ready to do, but we could certainly sort of draw a line across and say that's the developable area, and it'll include some internal open space, and this is going to be the open space down here. And we can sort of put lines that define that concept more specifically, but aren't quite boundary plans. It would be on this as an accompaniment, as a PUD concept plan, PRD concept plan with the development standards, as opposed to this, which is a plat. This plat has a different set of boundary standards that really demand full design and a line. But this has also, in the past, been adopted as part of the PRD. You open up the PRD for the zone, you see the map, you see the development standards. We could add those lines, those areas, if you will, to that plan, if that would help. It's certainly, the only way it's going to get developed, it's what we've said all along, is what we intend. So we can put some bold lines and say, open areas and develop area.
I'll add that any development of consequence up here is going to require Act 250 permitting, and this land to the south is heavily restricted through flood hazard and wetlands, so and riparian setbacks. So that will most definitely be the open space. This land on top is the land we've identified naturally, and where that line goes is, as Bob said, we can add it to the plan, but the sort of end product may not look exactly where we dash that line in. It could be a little back from the top of the slope or a little further down the slope, depending on how much of the space maybe is within the future development. So this is the dilemma that we faced and that we thought we had a plan for.
If I could add one
Let me jump in here, Bob. My concern with adding some specificity to the concept plan is that although it may look like it goes on a piece of paper, our ordinance sets it in stone, and it's tough under the a little less tough under PRD than PUD, but it's still unnecessarily, in my view, burdensome to get that level of detail when we've deferred so many things anyway. We're gonna get a lot more detail in the future.
Sure.
But you put down a line that says, here's where the open space is, and you go 2 feet into that space for some development element, and now the applicant has to come back before the board to do a full PRD amendment, which is more burdensome than just a site plan amendment, which we can do later.
And I'd add as well, there's really no risk of incrementally developing this. In other words, somebody won't be able to come back in and say, well, I just want to build this one house, because we need to meet the test of those development standards, which is, essentially 50% open space. That lot couldn't afford to meet that within its own lot. You essentially have to design the whole thing, create the open space somewhere else so that you can fully build out the lot that gets built out. So the next step will be that subdivision. It will define very specifically where all these open spaces, internal and external, to the development, and you'll know exactly where they are, and they'll have to meet the test that's in that book. So
Okay.
I don't think there's any risk it can get done in any other way.
Can I, the other point I was going to raise or make comment about was the emergency access. Fundamentally, the PRD depends on having that emergency access, and there's a right-of-way now on here across the Clark property. Do you have agreement with the town that that is a viable emergency access? I think as a condition here, we would expect that an agreement, or right-of-way agreement through Memorial Park, is it, or
That's right.
whatever way it is, be put in place to make this right-of-way across the Clark property actually valid.
Yeah.
The property currently benefits from a right-of-way across Memorial Park now.
The
which
Clark
is,
property does?
The Brooks house, Brookside property.
Down at the lower end of...
Current right-of-way is not in a place that's in any way usable nor advantageous to the park, because it kind of goes through the pool area and senior center. And so and Adam met with the department heads, all the departments out there, what was it, last week, to walk through by the skating rink, look at this, and there was consensus that that's the right place to effectively move that right-of-way up the hill. So that would need to be memorialized.
We had the fire chief, Steve Barrett, and Carol Lott standing there looking at the right-of-way marked out, saying we can get a truck through here.
I think we conditioned the last
Yeah, we did.
preliminary final plat with the development agreement as well.
Yeah. So either independently or as a part of a development agreement with the town, that right-of-way through Memorial Park will be required.
Yeah.
And whether the lower one comes or goes is actually not pertinent to this application anyway.
Yeah, true.
If they choose to cease to use it, or Brookside may still need it. I don't know.
Yeah, not really.
It's collapsing, isn't it? It's falling into the brooks.
Probably is. Yeah.
Also pertinent to that discussion is the public access across the intermediate plateau to the west Elm Brook, and that's another thing that requires a level of design to actually pin down where that's going to go because of the storm water in the road and other aspects of that.
When you say the public access, you talk about the trail or the walking path or whatever.
Yeah.
Now
this will be a gated access, non-public vehicular.
And previous, not this plat, but previous plans have shown that trail or an outline of where it might go. It's still roughly the...
It's on here, and it would come through that right-of-way and then cross the road, and then again the bank drops, levels out, and then drops again to the condominiums here, and it would hug the bottom of that slope.
So it is shown on the concept plan.
How close is the main thoroughfare to being town approved? Is it
The proposed thoroughfare?
the proposed thoroughfare, yes?
It's a bridge we haven't crossed yet. We have laid out a roadway that meets grade requirements and width requirements so that we're confident that we can build it. The town has a general policy to not try to accept new roadways. And they have some antiquated subdivision standards which makes roads with geometry requirements which no one would want to build today anyway. So it's a dance that we want to sort of come back and discuss with them as this project goes forward in the future. To date, it's been clear to us that the town has made no commitment that they will accept a new road, so they've made that very clear. We're happy to hear that's what they say, but we also are reserving the right to have that conversation with them when we bring the project back. There may be advantages for the town to own it, and it may be to our advantage to keep it a private road. There are some advantages in terms of width and, geometry that privately, we may not want to pass. We have said, I think, in the development agreement that we build it to the structural standards, so the gravel, all the drainage requirements, all of that would be met. But the road width in particular is not something that we want to comply with at this point.
But it's got to be put in so that the big truck can get up through there, the fire truck.
Absolutely, and that's one of the design criteria, both for the subdivision process, actually looks at that again, and Act 250. And we've actually mapped this out with confidence that we can get the ladder truck up there, and that was the intent of both roadways, both the one that goes the secondary, and the primary. So the intent would be to get emergency vehicle access up there for sure. Yeah, the town subdivision ordinance, I think, requires a 30-foot wide road, which unless you have a very high average daily traffic, is not even recommended under a state highway standard. So it's something from probably the 70s that just needs to get updated.
What's the width of the High Point Road, do you think?
I don't know.
Less than 30?
But most...
No, I'd say that's probably 30. It's a big road.
It's a big road. I was at 24, but...
You ever been down, what's the one behind the high school? The Sunny Acres on the backside of the middle school.
Yeah.
You drive down there, it's like, this road is incredibly wide. And then all of a sudden it narrows up by about 8 feet. And you're wondering, why is all that pavement up there? And that's indicative of sort of the ordinance that we thought was the right thing to do years ago. Now there's a standard that correlates average daily traffic with road width. Typically, I think a subdivision this size would be looking for a 24-foot wide road. Falls Road, we put in the Delta Business Campus going up the hill, is that width, including the bike lane?
Yeah.
Actually, that's only 19 feet plus a bike lane, to give you an idea. So it's plenty wide enough.
Can I just go back to the trail thing again, or the path? Could you draw that on the other map, or actually either? But
it's a green dash line that comes right across here.
okay. Clearly this could change at site plan or subdivision level, but the town's conservation commission looked at the pathway and said the following. Says that the condensed housing shown on the plan obscures a well-used existing trail connecting Memorial Park to Academy School. The Conservation Commission feels strongly this trail needs to remain connected and suggests that language be put in to require this across the property. Mm-hmm. And then they talk about the new pathway traverses the applicant's property but does not appear to connect to any other trails and would potentially end at the property line. Mm-hmm. Is that correct, or?
It's, I think, it's got two concepts that are valid. One, there is a trail, a woods road, that traverses the parcel now and would still be accessible through the property afterwards, but you'd be walking on sidewalks because that trail, Adam, is about here. Where does that leave the site? It's up in this quadrant.
It shows this one right here.
Dash lines. It's right about here. Actually, you'd probably be able to come off of our road and connect back up to that trail. So there's no reason, this is like any other town road. You can ride your bike on the roads, walk on the sidewalks, and get back to that trail and continue on your way. We're not obstructing it. We're just putting a land development, a neighborhood in the middle of it. This trail we have could be the trail that goes to Academy School. We don't really know because this trail it's an informal woods road through a neighboring piece of property, the Smith property. If they chose to deed that as the trail that connects Academy, well, they can come right through the development. We're not prohibiting that. The trail that we have connects to our green area down below and has the potential to connect over onto another piece of property, which is owned by a different property owner. But those rights of way, it's been in the planning for years to have a trail that connects, well, part of the Whetstone Pathway, Living Memorial Park, to Academy School through these back lots. Our intent with this was to preserve those so that that could continue to be done. We actually have two routes, either one, whatever ends up being the route is viable.
So although this appears to be talking about a singular trail, there's nothing that prevents a trail down to the open space at the bottom by the brook, and then the continuation of the,
right,
let's call it the upper Academy School Trail,
sure,
that would just pass through the development.
Pass through the development, right. Yep.
And then it's not a formal trail now in the sense that
there's no
rights of way through other property owners' land anyway.
Right. If that was defined, if there was a right of way secured and a trail in the planning, we would have just incorporated that into the design. We don't have that, so we're working a bit in the abstract.
Okay. Have you had a copy of that?
I guess we just got it.
Oh, you do. Okay, as long as you got a copy of it.
We don't have, this is,
You can.
we can have it.
Oh, right.
Well, we also mentioned in that letter about a community garden.
We identified this parcel, I mean, this little area of the land as a community garden early on, just because there's a flat piece of land up there, and the concern about being facing northwest or northeast.
All of our property.
The entire property.
Yeah, sorry, it's a northwest facing property. Yeah.
Any other questions from the board at the moment? Anybody in the public like to speak to the application?
I'm Kathy Andrew, and I live at Brookside condos. And one of the things that I have trouble with conceiving of this is that I don't see us on that map. I see the place where we are, but I don't see where I am, for example. And I don't see how, I mean, you can point to the area, but I don't think I wonder if the board and the select board and the people that are working on this have a really concept of how it is going to affect our little community, because we're not really there.
You live in the Evergreen condos?
I live in the Robin Way, the middle Robin Way. Are those structures, are those
Could you mark
outlined
that on there
or-
for her?
Yeah,
Or for us?
There's one that's pretty close to the, how many are there? I think there are 4 of them?
Three.
There's 3 buildings, yeah.
I think we got the lower one barely on there. And there's the middle one at the bottom of that slope.
Yeah.
I apologize for that.
Which one are you in?
I'm in the middle one, in the middle. And then there's all the apartments, the lower ones.
Okay.
But I just think it would be useful to have that a little bit more clearly defined so that everybody can see what we're talking about as the impact on us.
We did at an earlier stage in this application, if not this one, the PUD application, the board did make a site visit, and we had a good walk around. Was it October time last year, maybe, or maybe it was before that?
Yeah.
We had a good walk around and get a pretty good feel for the topology of the site, the location of the existing Brookside developments, and how close things were to each other and how far things were apart.
Yeah.
And conceivably, when we go to site plan, I have a feeling that we may well make another site visit at that point when we have a bit more of a feel for it.
I think the biggest thing we can say is that we acknowledged early on that sending the traffic through the development would have a heavy impact on the residents of those condos, and that it would in fact be worth it to construct a road at considerable cost to come outside of that, of your development.
Yeah, and I think I can speak for all of us that we're really grateful for that, and also really grateful for your deciding to put the new right of way where you're going to put it. That I think that alleviates a lot of nervousness on our part. So we do appreciate that. But okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else on the board? Any further questions?
Did you read this one from Jane Sontag?
Is it in the record? Yeah.
We've already talked about that, location and the access.
I'm not sure what that's referring to though. Is that the access to to Western Avenue or the access? The access.
Well, I think the first paragraph is a consideration for the access to Western Avenue. That there be a left turning lane and a right turning lane.
That comes up later.
Right.
Brian, you had that. You have a copy of that already?
Yes.
Okay. So if there are no further.
I'll say
Yes.
something about that. I think what you're talking about is Jane was concerned about access to Western Avenue, that we might be discussing that tonight. But is that not on the table for tonight? The access and entrance and egress onto? Because I'm sure that will come up at some point. But if it should come up tonight in any way, that we also want to address that. She wanted to make sure that came up, that we need more turning lanes and things like that, because we're talking about considerable more traffic.
Do you want to speak to that briefly? Thank you.
We hired a consultant for a traffic, it wasn't a full-blown traffic study, but they did come and count traffic and gauge the quality of the intersection, and that the level of development wouldn't create an undue burden. That being said, we all know it's impossible to turn left on Western Avenue from any of these streets, and there is actually room at the exit to put a right turn slip lane so that cars turning right could slide by and keep going right while the people turning left would wait for their break in the action.
Has Public Works or the town or the state expressed an opinion on that at all?
Not yet, but it would come out through the Exit 50 process.
Yeah.
We realized that we'd have to deal with it, so we wanted to make sure we left the room to build it.
Which you do?
Yeah, we looked at the Caruso House lot, specifically left land as part adjacent to the right of way to have room to widen.
Is that in terms of the Caruso House land? It's not impacted by the PRD at all.
No.
That's separate property on the other side of the road.
Right.
Other side of that town road. So.
Right. Exactly. It's a separate parcel. But nonetheless, the room is there. We wanted to make sure it was there so that we could address this when it came up at the later stages in anticipation of it being an issue. We're not going to be able to fix the left-hand turn lane, but at least we can let people going right get out. It's never going to get fixed.
Please, yes.
My name is Ralph Palmer. We're moving into the Evergreen unit next week. And I'd like to know how many units we're talking about, how many individual dwelling units we're looking at putting in.
The development density, if you take away 50% of the land for open space, it leaves 8.5 acres at 12 units an acre, which equals 102 units.
That's a lot of traffic.
It's a lot of traffic. The concept behind this proposal is that having a layout and a density of this nature actually would reduce the traffic as opposed to 100 units built further out of town. With development in this area, some portion of the residents could access some of the services nearby by foot, by bicycle, and by public transportation. But there is a lot of traffic associated with 100 units.
Any further questions from the board? Looking for a motion to approve 2011-107.
So moved.
Final plat.
Second.
All those any further comment? All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? 601, Brian. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
sounded like a
Old
Christmas
crow.
Oh, sorry. Motion to adjourn.
Oh.
Secondly, thank you.